The wind was howling like a wild animal outside the small apartment. Carlos Martinez pressed his face against the window and watched the trees bend almost to the ground. Lightning lit up the dark sky every few seconds, followed by thunder that made their old building shake. "This is the worst storm we've had in years," Elena said, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. The power had gone out an hour ago, and now they were sitting by candlelight in their tiny living room. Their two kids, Sofia and Miguel, were huddled together on the old couch playing cards by the flickering light. Carlos worked at the metal factory downtown, pulling double shifts just to pay the rent. Elena cleaned houses for 3 different families during the week. Money was always tight, but they made it work. They had to. Their little apartment was cramped, just one bedroom that the kids shared while Carlos and Elena slept on the fold-out couch. But it was home. "Dad, look how the rain is hitting the window," Miguel pointed excitedly. At 8 years old, he found the storm thrilling rather than scary. Sofia, who was 12, rolled her eyes at her little brother but smiled anyway. "It's really coming down," Carlos agreed, watching the water stream down the glass. "Good thing. We're safe inside." That's when they heard it. A desperate knocking on their front door, not just a polite tap, but urgent banging that cut through the sound of the storm. Carlos and Elena looked at each other. Who would be out in weather like this? The knocking came again, more insistent this time. "Should we answer it?" Elena whispered. Living in their neighborhood, you had to be careful. But the knocking sounded desperate, not threatening. Carlos walked slowly to the door and looked through the peephole. In the dim light from the hallway, he could see a man standing there. He was completely soaked, his expensive-looking suit clinging to his body. The man was shivering and kept looking over his shoulder as if he was afraid. "There's a guy out there," Carlos called back to Elena. "He looks like he's in trouble." Elena came over and took a look for herself. The man appeared to be in his 40s, with graying hair that was plastered to his head from the rain. His clothes looked expensive, but right now he just looked like someone who needed help. "We should let him in," Elena said without hesitation. "Look at him, he's freezing." Carlos wasn't so sure. "We don't know him, Elena. What if he's just someone who needs help?" Elena interrupted gently. "What if that was you out there?" Carlos looked at his wife's kind face in the candlelight. This was why he loved her. Even when they barely had enough for themselves, Elena always wanted to help others. He nodded and unlocked the door. The man almost fell forward when the door opened. Water dripped from his clothes onto their welcome mat. "Oh, thank God," the man said, his voice shaking from the cold. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but my car broke down about 2 blocks from here. I've been walking in this storm for 20 minutes, and yours was the first door with light showing." Come in," Elena said immediately, stepping aside. "You're soaked to the bone." The man hesitated for a moment, as if he wasn't used to accepting help from strangers. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose—" "Don't be silly," Elena said, already heading to their small closet. "Carlos, help him get out of that wet jacket." The stranger stepped inside, and Carlos could see him taking in their modest apartment. The flickering candles, the old furniture, the children's school books scattered on the kitchen table. If he was judging them, though, it didn't show on his face. "I'm David," the man said, extending his hand to Carlos. His grip was firm, but his hand was ice cold. "Carlos Martinez. This is my wife, Elena, and those are our kids, Sofia and Miguel." Sofia waved shyly from the couch, while Miguel stared openly at the stranger. David waved back with a small smile. "Elena, we need to get him some dry clothes," Carlos said. "He's going to catch pneumonia." Elena was already pulling out Carlos's old work shirt and a pair of jeans. "These might be a little big on you, but they're warm and dry," she told David. "I can't take your clothes," David protested. "You've already done too much." "Nonsense," Elena said firmly. "The bathroom is right there. Go change before you get sick." While David changed, Elena put on a pot of coffee on their small gas stove. The electricity was out, but the gas still worked. Carlos found some old towels for David to dry his hair. "Mom, why is that man all dressed up?" Miguel whispered loudly. "Hush," Sofia told her brother. Maybe he was coming from work. When David came out of the bathroom, he looked completely different. Carlos's old clothes hung loosely on his frame, but he looked much more comfortable and warmer. "Thank you so much," David said, holding up his wet clothes. "I feel human again." "Sit down," Elena insisted, pouring him a cup of hot coffee. "You must be exhausted." David sat carefully on their old chair as if he wasn't sure it would hold him. "I really can't thank you enough. Not many people would open their door to a stranger in the middle of the night." "It's just what you do," Carlos said simply. "Someone needs help. You help them." David wrapped his hands around the warm coffee cup and looked around their small apartment again. This time, Carlos noticed something different in his expression. It wasn't judgment, it was something else. Maybe surprise, or respect. "The storm doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon," Elena observed, peering out the window. "The radio said earlier that some roads are flooding." "You can stay here tonight," Carlos offered. "We don't have much space, but you're welcome to sleep on the couch." "Oh no, I couldn't," David started to say. "Where else are you going to go?" Elena asked practically. "Even if you could call someone, no one should be driving in this weather." David looked out at the storm still raging outside, then back at this family who had welcomed him without question. "If you're sure it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," Elena said warmly. "We'll make it work." Sophia had been quietly observing the stranger. "Are you okay?" she asked suddenly. "You looked really scared when you came in." David smiled at her, the first genuine smile they'd seen from him. "I was scared," he admitted. "I've never been caught in a storm like that. But you know what? I feel much better now." Miguel had been staring at David's expensive watch, which he was still wearing. "That's a really cool watch," the boy said. David looked down at it almost as if he'd forgotten he was wearing it. "Thank you," he said quietly. As the evening went on, David seemed to relax more. He helped Elena clean up the coffee cups, despite her protests. He listened carefully when Sophia talked about her school project, and he answered Miguel's endless questions about the storm with patience. Carlos found himself liking this stranger. There was something genuine about him, despite his obvious discomfort with their humble surroundings. David kept looking around as if he was seeing something he'd never seen before. "We'll set you up on the couch with some blankets," Elena said, as it got later. "It's not the most comfortable, but it's perfect," David interrupted. "You've been incredibly kind. I won't forget this." As the family prepared for bed, Carlos couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their guest than met the eye. But Elena was right. Sometimes you just had to help people, no questions asked. That's what made you human. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside their small apartment, a stranger had found shelter with a family who had very little, but were willing to share everything. The next morning brought more rain, though the terrible winds had finally calmed down. David woke up on the Martinez family's couch to the smell of eggs cooking and the sound of children getting ready for school. Elena was in the tiny kitchen, making breakfast with what they had. "Good morning," she called softly when she saw David, sitting up. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in a long time," David said, and he seemed to mean it. He folded the blankets neatly and tried to tidy the couch. Carlos was getting ready for work, putting on his factory uniform. "The radio says the main roads are still flooded," he told David. "Looks like you might be stuck with us for another day." "I hope that's okay," David said quickly. "I can try to find somewhere else." "Don't be ridiculous," Elena said, setting a plate of eggs in front of him. "You're not going anywhere in this weather." Sophia was at the kitchen table struggling with her homework. Her old laptop was making strange noises and kept freezing up. "This stupid computer," she muttered under her breath. "Sophia, language," Elena warned gently. "Sorry, Mom, but look at this thing." Sophia showed David the ancient laptop. "It takes forever to start up, and half the time it just shuts off by itself." David looked at the computer with interest. "May I?" he asked, and Sophia slid it over to him. Within minutes, David had the laptop running better than it had in months. He cleaned up the hard drive, closed unnecessary programs, and somehow made it run faster. Wow, Sophia said, impressed. How did you know how to do that? I work with computers, David said simply. What's your project about? We're supposed to write about local history, Sophia explained. But it's hard to research when the computer keeps crashing. David spent the next hour helping Sophia with her research, showing her better ways to find information and organize her thoughts. He seemed to know a lot about many different subjects. Miguel came bouncing into the kitchen already dressed for school. Is the storm man staying again? He asked loudly. Miguel, Elena said, trying not to laugh. His name is David. Sorry, is David staying again? It looks like it, David said with a smile. Is that okay with you? Yeah. Can you help me with my math homework later? You're really smart. After Carlos left for work and the kids left for school, Elena and David found themselves alone in the small apartment. Elena was embarrassed about having to leave for her cleaning jobs. I have to go to work too, she said apologetically. You're welcome to stay here, but I feel bad leaving you alone. Don't worry about me, David said. Actually, would it be okay if I came with you? I'd like to help somehow, and I hate sitting around doing nothing. Elena looked surprised. You want to come clean houses with me? Why not? It's honest work, and you're being so kind to let me stay here. Elena studied his face to see if he was serious. It's not easy work, she warned. And Mrs. Chen can be pretty demanding. I think I can handle it, David said. So Elena found herself taking this well-dressed stranger to clean Mrs. Chen's big house across town. Mrs. Chen looked suspicious when Elena showed up with David, but Elena explained about the storm and how David was helping out. David threw himself into the work without complaint. He cleaned windows, vacuumed carpets, and scrubbed bathrooms. Elena watched in amazement as this man, who was clearly used to a different kind of life, worked as hard as she did. You're really good at this, Elena said as they cleaned the kitchen together. My mother always said any job worth doing was worth doing well, David replied, carefully wiping down the counters. Mrs. Chen was impressed too. Your friend is a hard worker, she told Elena when they finished. She even paid them a little extra. On the way home, Elena couldn't help but ask, David, what do you really do for work? You seem to know about everything. David was quiet for a moment. I work in business, he said finally. Technology and investments. Must be a good job, Elena said. Your clothes were really expensive. I've been fortunate, David said carefully, but today was more satisfying than most days at my regular job. When they got back to the apartment, Sophia and Miguel were already home from school. Sophia ran up to show David that her computer was still working perfectly. Thank you so much for fixing it, she said. I got so much research done at school today. Miguel had brought home a permission slip for soccer tryouts. Mom, can I try out for the team? He asked hopefully. Elena read the paper and her face fell. Mijo, we'd have to buy all the equipment, the shoes, the uniform, the shin guards. I'm sorry, but we just can't afford it right now. Miguel's shoulders slumped, but he tried not to show how disappointed he was. It's okay, Mom. Maybe next year. David watched this exchange with a thoughtful expression. Later, when Miguel was doing homework and Sophia was reading, David found Elena in the kitchen. How long has Miguel wanted to play soccer? He asked quietly. Oh, for years, Elena said with a sad smile. He's actually pretty good. He plays with the kids in the courtyard all the time, but the school team requires so much equipment, and with Carlos working so hard just to pay rent, and Sophia's computer problems. That laptop is older than she is, Elena laughed. We got it from a neighbor who was throwing it away. I keep hoping it'll last until she graduates, but I'm not sure it will. David nodded thoughtfully. They're good kids. They're the best kids, Elena said proudly. They never complain, even when things are tight. They understand that we all have to work together. That evening, Carlos came home exhausted from his double shift. His cough was worse, and Elena noticed he was having trouble catching his breath. You should see a doctor about that cough, she said worriedly. It's just the dust from the factory, Carlos said, but even David could see he didn't look well. When's the last time you had a checkup? Elena asked. Carlos looked embarrassed. We can't afford for me to miss work, and the clinic is expensive without insurance. David listened to all of this without saying anything, but Elena could see him, taking mental notes of everything. For dinner, Elena made rice and beans with the little bit of chicken they had left. She apologized for the simple meal, but David insisted it was delicious. "This is better than most restaurant food," he said, and he seemed to mean it. After dinner, David helped Miguel with his math homework while Sophia worked on her history project. Carlos dozed in his chair, still coughing occasionally. "David," Sophia said suddenly, "why were you dressed so fancy when the storm caught you?" David paused in helping Miguel with fractions. "I was coming from a business meeting," he said. "Must have been an important meeting," Miguel observed. "Your suit looked really expensive." "Sometimes business requires dressing up," David said simply. Elena noticed that David seemed uncomfortable talking about himself. Whenever the conversation turned to his work or his life, he changed the subject. But she also noticed how carefully he watched their family. He paid attention to their struggles, their dreams, and the way they treated each other. It was as if he was studying them, trying to understand something. As the second night fell, with the rain still coming down steadily, David settled back onto the couch. "Thank you again for letting me stay," he said to the family. "Your family, now," Elena said warmly. "Family takes care of each other." David looked touched by her words. "I won't forget that," he said quietly. But Elena had the strangest feeling that David was planning something. She just couldn't figure out what. By the third day, the storm had finally passed, leaving the neighborhood soaked but calm. The morning sun was shining through the apartment windows for the first time since David had arrived. Carlos left early for work, still coughing, but insisting he felt fine. The kids got ready for school, and Elena prepared to head out for her cleaning jobs. But this time, David said he needed to make some phone calls about his car. "You can use our phone," Elena offered, pointing to their old landline. "Thank you, but I need to check in with my office too. Is there somewhere nearby where I can make some private calls?" Elena directed him to a coffee shop down the street that had phones and Wi-Fi. "Take your time," she said. "You know where the Yastua spare key is hidden if you get back before we do." After everyone left, David walked to the coffee shop. But instead of calling about his car, he spent the next 2 hours on his phone making very different kinds of calls. "I need you to check on a few things for me," he said quietly to someone on the other end. "A family named Martinez. Carlos works at Peterson Manufacturing and Elena cleans houses. I need to know about their financial situation, but be discreet." When Elena returned from work that afternoon, she found David back at the apartment looking thoughtful. Sophia and Miguel burst through the door a few minutes later, both talking excitedly about their day. "David, guess what?" Miguel called out. "The coach said if I can get the equipment, I can definitely make the soccer team. He saw me playing at recess and said I'm really good." David smiled at the boy's excitement. "That's wonderful news." Sophia was excited too, but for a different reason. "My teacher said my history project was one of the best she's ever seen. She's going to enter it in the school competition." "I'm so proud of you both," Elena said, hugging her children. But David could see the sadness in her eyes. Miguel still couldn't join the team, and Sophia's computer was already acting up again. That evening, Carlos came home looking worse than ever. His cough was so bad that he could barely eat dinner. "Carlos, you really need to see a doctor," Elena said firmly. "This isn't just factory dust anymore. We can't afford it right now," Carlos said between coughs. "Maybe next month when we get caught up on bills." David had been watching this conversation carefully. "What if I told you I knew a place where you could get checked out for free?" Andy asked. Carlos looked skeptical. "There's no such thing as free medical care around here. Actually, there are some community health programs," David said. "Let me make some calls tomorrow. I might be able to help you find something." The next morning, David announced that his car was finally fixed and he would be leaving that afternoon. The whole family seemed genuinely sad to see him go. "It's been amazing having you here," Elena said. "You feel like part of the family now." "You saved my life that first night," David said seriously. "I won't forget your kindness." Before leaving, David asked if he could take a photo with the family. I want to remember you all, he explained. They gathered in the living room, and David used his expensive phone to take several pictures. Then he carefully wrote down their address. I'd like to send you a thank you card, he explained. Miguel hugged David goodbye. I'm going to miss you, Stormman. Sophia gave him a shy smile. Thanks for helping with my computer and my homework. Elena and Carlos shook his hand warmly. Our door's always open if you're ever in the neighborhood, Elena said. David looked around their small apartment one more time. You have a beautiful home and a wonderful family, he said softly. A sleek black car pulled up outside, much nicer than any taxi they'd ever seen. David gathered his things and headed for the door. That's a fancy taxi, Sophia observed, watching from the window. Maybe he called one of those expensive car services, Elena said. They all waved goodbye as David's car drove away. The apartment felt strangely empty without him. 3 days later, strange things started happening. Sophia came home from school carrying a brand new laptop bag. Mom, look what I got, she called excitedly. Elena stared at the expensive-looking computer. Where did this come from? The school counselor called me to the office and said I won some kind of technology scholarship, Sophia explained. They said because my grades are so good and my family worked so hard I was selected for a special program. Elena was suspicious. What program? I never heard of anything like this. Mrs. Rodriguez said it's funded by anonymous donors who want to help good students, Sophia said, already powering up the laptop. Look how fast it works. The next day, Miguel found a complete soccer uniform and equipment set sitting outside their apartment door. There was a card attached that read, For Miguel Martinez, from your community sports supporters. Mom, look, Miguel shouted, running inside with the gear. Someone left this for me. Elena examined the equipment. It was all brand new and exactly the right size for Miguel. This is very expensive stuff, she said, puzzled. The card says it's from community supporters, Miguel said. Maybe it's from the school. Elena called the school, but they had no record of any community sports program. 2 days after that, Carlos got a call at work. Mr. Martinez, this is Dr. Williams from the Riverside Community Health Center. We have an opening for a free comprehensive health exam if you can come in today. Carlos was confused. I never signed up for anything like that. According to our records, you were referred by our community outreach program. Everything is completely covered. Carlos looked at the phone suspiciously but decided not to question free medical care. That afternoon, he got the most thorough health exam he'd had in years. The doctor diagnosed his breathing problems as early asthma, probably caused by factory dust, and gave him an inhaler that made an immediate difference. Who referred me? Carlos asked when he was leaving. The receptionist checked her computer. It just says Community Outreach Program. We get anonymous donations that allow us to provide free care to working families. That evening, the Martinez family sat around their kitchen table looking at Sophia's new laptop, Miguel's soccer gear, and Carlos's medical papers. This is all too much to be a coincidence, Elena said slowly. Maybe we're just having good luck for once, Carlos suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. Sophia was the first to say what they were all thinking. Do you think this has something to do with David? That's crazy, Miguel said. He was just a regular guy whose car broke down. But Elena was remembering things. David's expensive clothes, his knowledge about computers, the way he'd watched their family so carefully, and that car that had picked him up. It definitely wasn't a regular taxi. There was something different about him, she said thoughtfully. The way he talked, the things he knew. Plus he asked for our address, Sophia added. And he took all those pictures. Carlos was still skeptical. Even if David wanted to help us, how could he afford all this? That laptop probably cost more than I make in a month. Elena picked up the business card the health clinic had given Carlos. She stared at it for a long moment, then got up and went to their old computer. What are you doing? Sophia asked. I'm going to look up David's phone number, Elena said. If he's really just a regular guy, it should be easy to find him. She typed the number David had given them into the search engine. At first nothing came up. Then she tried searching for just his first name and the number. What she found made her gasp. "Carlos," she called, her voice shaking. "You need to see this." The whole family crowded around the computer screen. Elena had found a news article from the local business journal. And there, smiling from the webpage, was a picture of David. But the caption underneath didn't say David. It said, "David Richardson, CEO of Richardson Technology Solutions, announces new community investment initiative." Elena clicked on the article with trembling hands. As she read, the family learned that David Richardson was one of the wealthiest men in the state. His company was worth billions, and he was known for his charitable work. "Oh my God," Sophia whispered. "We had a billionaire sleeping on our couch." Miguel's eyes were huge. "A real billionaire? Like in the movies?" Elena kept reading. The article mentioned that David Richardson often worked undercover to identify families who would benefit from his foundation's programs. It said he believed in personal vetting of potential recipients. Carlos sat down heavily in his chair. "We treated a billionaire like a regular person." "We treated him like a person who needed help," Elena corrected. Which is exactly what he was that night. They all sat in stunned silence processing this information. Their mysterious houseguest hadn't been a regular businessman at all. He was one of the richest people in the country, and apparently he had decided that the Martinez family was worth helping. Elena couldn't sleep that night. She kept staring at the ceiling, thinking about David Richardson sitting at their kitchen table, eating rice and beans and helping Miguel with his homework. A billionaire in their tiny apartment. The next morning, she decided to do more research. While Carlos was at work and the kids were at school, she spent hours on Sophia's new laptop, reading everything she could find about David Richardson. What she discovered was fascinating. David had grown up poor, the son of a single mother who worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. He'd built his technology company from nothing, starting in a garage with borrowed equipment. But the most interesting articles were about his charitable work. Unlike many wealthy people who just wrote checks to big organizations, David Richardson had a reputation for getting personally involved. The business magazines called him eccentric and unconventional. Elena found story after story of David showing up unexpectedly in people's lives. A struggling teacher in Detroit who found out her mysterious substitute volunteer was actually David Richardson. A homeless veteran in Phoenix who discovered that the man who'd been bringing him coffee every day was a billionaire. "He likes to see how people treat others when they think no one important is watching," one article explained. "Richardson believes that character matters more than need when deciding who to help." Elena thought about the 3 days David had spent with them, how carefully he'd watched them interact with each other, how he'd paid attention to their struggles and their dreams, how he'd seemed surprised by their willingness to help a stranger. She found more information about the Richardson Foundation. It didn't just give money. It provided comprehensive support to help families build better lives. Education, job training, housing assistance, medical care. But the foundation was very selective about who they helped. "We look for families who demonstrate strong values and would use assistance wisely," the foundation's website explained. "Our goal is not just to give handouts, but to create lasting change." Elena was reading about their family empowerment program when the phone rang. Mrs. Martinez. The voice on the other end was professional and polite. "This is Jennifer Chen from the Richardson Foundation. I believe you recently hosted our founder during a storm." Elena's heart started pounding. "Yes, we just figured out who he really was. Mr. Richardson asked me to call you. He'd very much like to speak with your family if you're willing. Would this evening be convenient?" Elena's hands were shaking as she wrote down the details. David Richardson wanted to meet with them tonight. When Carlos came home from work, Elena told him about the phone call. Carlos sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "I don't understand any of this," he said. "Why? Would someone like that want to help us?" "Maybe we should ask him," Elena suggested. When Sofia and Miguel got home from school, Elena explained that David was coming to visit them. Miguel was excited, but Sofia seemed nervous. "Are we in trouble?" Sofia asked. "Did we do something wrong?" "No. Mija," Elena assured her. "I think it's the opposite." At 7 o'clock sharp, there was a soft knock on their door. Elena opened it to find David Richardson standing there. But he looked different now. He was wearing expensive clothes again, and there was something more formal about his posture, but his smile was the same. "Hello, Elena," he said warmly. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Come in," Elena said, suddenly feeling nervous about their small apartment. Now that she knew who David really was, everything seemed so humble in comparison. But David acted exactly the same as before. He hugged Miguel, asked Sofia about school, and shook Carlos's hand warmly. "Please sit down," Elena said, gesturing to their old couch. David sat down and looked around the apartment with the same gentle expression he'd had before. "It's good to be back," he said simply. "Why didn't you tell us who you were?" Miguel asked directly. David smiled at the boy's honesty. "Would you have treated me differently if you'd known?" Miguel thought about this. "Maybe. Probably." "That's exactly why I didn't tell you," David said. "I wanted to see who you really were, and what I saw was a family that opens their door to strangers, shares what little they have, and treats everyone with dignity and respect." Carlos was still struggling with the whole situation. "But we're nobody special. We're just regular people, trying to get by." "You're wrong about that," David said seriously. "Do you know how many doors I knocked on that night before yours?" The family looked at each other, confused. 12, David continued. 12 apartments in this building and the next one over. Some people pretended not to be home. Others opened the door but said they couldn't help. A few offered to call the police for me. Only one family, your family, invited a complete stranger inside without hesitation. Elena felt tears starting in her eyes. "We just did what anyone would do." "No," David said firmly. "You did what good people do, and that's rare." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. "I'd like to tell you about the Richardson Foundation's Family Empowerment Program if you're interested in hearing about it." For the next hour, David explained how the program worked. It wasn't charity, he emphasized. It was an investment in families who had already proven their character and values. "We help with education, career development, housing, and medical care," David explained. "But we also expect families to give back to their communities once they're stable." The program would pay for Carlos to attend technical school while continuing to support his family. Elena could get a small business loan to start her own cleaning company. Both children would receive full educational scholarships. "But why us?" Carlos asked again. "There must be thousands of families who need help." David was quiet for a moment. "When I was 8 years old, my mother and I were caught in a terrible snowstorm. Our car broke down, and we walked for miles looking for help. Most people turned us away because we looked poor and desperate. Finally, an old woman opened her door and let us stay the night. She fed us, gave us warm clothes, and never asked for anything in return." He paused, lost in the memory. "That woman saved our lives, but more than that, she taught me what kindness looked like. I never forgot her." Elena understood now. "You were looking for people like her. I was looking for people like you," David corrected. "People who help others simply because it's the right thing to do." Sofia had been quiet through most of the conversation, but now she spoke up. "What if we say yes? What happens then?" David smiled at her. "Then your lives change. Your father gets the training he needs for a better job. Your mother gets to build her own business. You and Miguel get to focus on your education without worrying about money. And eventually, when you're successful, you help other families the way I'm helping you now." Miguel raised his hand like he was in school. "Can I still play soccer?" Everyone laughed, including David. "You can definitely still play soccer. In fact, I think you'll have a lot more opportunities to play." Carlos looked at Elena, and she could see he was overwhelmed. "This is too much," he said. "We can't accept all this." Why not? David asked. Simply, because we didn't do anything to earn it. David stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where he'd spent 3 days learning about this family. You opened your door to a stranger in a storm, he said. You shared your food with someone who couldn't repay you. You gave up your comfort so I could sleep safely. You treated me like family when you had no reason to trust me. He turned back to face them. You think that's nothing, but it's everything. It's the foundation of human decency, and it's exactly what the world needs more of. Elena wiped tears from her eyes. If we say yes, how do we know we won't change? How do we know we'll still be the same people? David sat back down and looked at each family member in turn. Because I watched you for 3 days. I saw how you treat each other, how you handle problems, how you talk about other people. Those things don't change because you have more money. If anything, having security will let you help more people. The room was quiet as the Martinez family absorbed everything they'd heard. Finally, Carlos spoke. If we do this, we want to pay it forward someday. We want to help other families like us. David's smile was radiant. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. As David prepared to leave, he handed Elena a business card. This has my direct number. Call me when you've had time to think about everything. How long do we have to decide? Elena asked. Take all the time you need, David said. But Elena, I already know what your answer will be. After he left, the Martinez family sat around their kitchen table in stunned silence. Their lives were about to change in ways they never could have imagined, all because they'd opened their door to a stranger in a storm. Elena didn't sleep at all that night. She walked around their tiny apartment looking at everything differently. The faded wallpaper, the secondhand furniture, the stack of overdue bills on the kitchen counter. Tomorrow, all of this could change. Carlos was awake too. She found him, sitting at the kitchen table at 3 a.m. holding David's business card. Are you having second thoughts? Elena asked, sitting down beside him. I keep thinking about what my father used to say. Carlos replied quietly. He always told me that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Elena nodded. But what if sometimes good things really do happen to good people? What if we mess this up? Carlos asked. What if we take all this help and somehow fail? Elena took his hand. Then we'll fail together the same way we've struggled together, but Carlos, what if we don't fail? What if this is our chance to build the life we've always dreamed of for our kids? The next morning, Sophia and Miguel were unusually quiet at breakfast. Finally, Sophia spoke up. Mom, if we say yes to Mr. Richardson, do we have to move away from here? Why would you ask that? Elena replied. Because rich people live in different places and all my friends are here. Miguel nodded seriously. And what if we become snobby? I don't want to be one of those rich kids who thinks they're better than everyone else. Elena looked at her children with pride. Even faced with an incredible opportunity, they were thinking about how it would affect others. Listen to me, both of you, she said firmly. Money doesn't make you a different person. Your character, your values, how you treat other people, that's what makes you who you are. And that won't change no matter where we live or how much money we have. Carlos put down his coffee cup. Your mother's right. We are who we are because of how we were raised, because of what we believe in. Having more opportunities won't change that. That evening, the family sat down together to make their decision. They talked about their fears, their hopes, and their dreams. They talked about the responsibility that would come with David's help. If we do this, Elena said, we have to promise each other that we'll always remember where we came from. We'll always help people who need it, the way people helped us. And we'll never forget that the most important things aren't things you can buy. Carlos added. Sophia and Miguel both nodded solemnly. Elena picked up the phone and dialed David's number. Elena, David answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting for her call. Have you made your decision? Yes, Elena said, her voice steady. We'd like to accept your offer, but we have some conditions. David chuckled. I'm listening. We want to start giving back right away, even while we're still receiving help. We want to be involved in choosing other families to help. And we want our children to understand that this is a responsibility, not just a gift. Those are excellent conditions, David said warmly. I wouldn't have it any other way. 1 year later, Elena Martinez stood in the kitchen of their new home preparing dinner for a very special guest. The house wasn't a mansion. David had helped them choose a modest but comfortable home in a good neighborhood. Carlos was finishing his last semester of technical school and had already been offered a supervisor position at a new manufacturing plant. Elena's cleaning business now employed 6 women from their old neighborhood, all single mothers who needed flexible work. Sophia was thriving in her new school, already talking about college and her dreams of becoming a teacher. Miguel had made the soccer team and was playing in a league championship next week. The doorbell rang and Miguel ran to answer it. "David!" he shouted, giving their friend a huge hug. David Richardson looked exactly the same as always, kind, genuine, and happy to see them. But now when he visited, it was as a friend, not as someone studying them. "How's the soccer star?" David asked Miguel. "We're going to win the championship," Miguel said confidently. "You're still coming to watch, right?" "Wouldn't miss it," David promised. Over dinner, the family updated David on everything that had happened since his last visit. Elena told him about their latest family they'd helped through the foundation. A single father with 3 children whose wife had passed away. "We gave them the Christmas we never could afford to give our own kids," Elena said. "Seeing their faces when they opened those presents. It was better than getting presents ourselves," Sophia added. David smiled. "And how does it feel being on the giving end instead of the receiving end?" Carlos thought carefully before answering. "Humbling," he said finally. "When you're struggling, you think about what you need. When you're stable, you realize how much other people need." After dinner, David and Carlos sat on the back porch while Elena and the kids cleaned up inside. "Any regrets?" David asked. Carlos looked through the window at his family, laughing together in their warm, comfortable kitchen. "Only one," he said. David raised an eyebrow. "I regret that it took a storm to bring us together," Carlos said with a smile. "I wish we'd met sooner." David laughed. "You know, that storm wasn't really an accident." Carlos stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I'd been researching your neighborhood for weeks, looking for families to help. I knew about you and Elena, about your jobs, about how hard you were working. I was planning to find a way to meet you naturally. So the storm was real," David said quickly. "But I was already in your neighborhood that night, sitting in my car trying to figure out how to approach your family without seeming strange. When the storm hit, it seemed like fate." Carlos shook his head in amazement. "So you really did need help that night?" "More than you know," David said quietly. "I needed to remember what real kindness looked like. I needed to see that there were still people in the world who would help a stranger without expecting anything in return." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars come out in the clear sky. "David," Carlos said eventually, "thank you. Not just for the money or the opportunities. Thank you for seeing something in us that we didn't even see in ourselves." "You saved my life that night," David replied. "Not from the storm, from losing faith in people. You reminded me why I do this work." Inside the house, Elena was helping Miguel with his homework while Sophia worked on her laptop. The same laptop David had helped her fix that first day, which she'd insisted on keeping even after getting the new one. "It reminds me of where we came from," she'd explained. Elena looked around their comfortable living room and thought about their old apartment. They'd kept in touch with their former neighbors, and several families had benefited from the foundation's programs. Mrs. Rodriguez, their old neighbor, was now Elena's business partner. "We didn't just get help," Elena had told David recently. "We got a chance to become the people we always wanted to be." As David prepared to leave that evening, Miguel ran up to him with a drawing. "I made this for you," Miguel said, handing David a colorful picture. David looked at the drawing carefully. It showed a small apartment with stick figures inside and rain falling outside. But in the center was a bright yellow sun. "What's the sun for?" David asked. "That's you," Miguel explained. You came into our dark house during the storm and made everything bright. David knelt down to Miguel's level. You know what, Miguel? You've got it backwards. Your family was the sun. You brought light into my life. As David drove away from the Martinez house that night, he thought about the dozens of families he'd helped over the years. But none had affected him quite like this one. His phone rang, and he saw it was Jennifer from the foundation. How did the visit go? She asked. Perfect, David said. They're ready to take on their first mentorship family. Already? It's only been a year. David smiled, thinking about Elena's determination to give back, Carlos's gratitude, and the way Sofia and Miguel understood that their good fortune came with responsibility. Some people are natural helpers, he said. The Martinez family doesn't need to wait to start changing lives. They've been doing it all along. The storm that had brought them together was long over, but the warmth it had created continued to spread, touching new lives and creating new hope. Sometimes the best investments aren't in stocks or real estate, David thought. Sometimes the best investments are in people who understand that kindness multiplies when it's shared. The Martinez family had learned that lesson long before they met him. David had simply given them the resources to teach it to others, and that, he knew, was how you really change the world, one act of kindness at a time.